Joining us now on the Great S.C.O.T.T Show on ESPN 1420 is Chris Landry. And if you don't know about Chris, then you don't know what you're missing out on. He has spent a lifetime in football. He served as a coach, a scout, and an administrator on both the college football and NFL levels. He currently operates his own coaching and scouting consulting business, helps some NFL organizations and college football programs. You can learn more at LandryFootball.com, and had a career in the NFL for a while, and he joins us right now to talk about some of the prospects in the upcoming draft. Chris, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Scott. It's a busy time of year, and it's great to visit with you again.
Well, I know it's busy for you, and for some of our listeners that maybe haven't heard you on the program before, just give them, a brief rundown of what you've done in the past and how it's brought you to what you're doing right now.
Well, I started in the scouting business a long time ago as a part-time scout for one of the league scouting arms, Blesto, in the early 80s. I was a college coach at LSU, and then got in full-time in the NFL on Bill Belichick's staff in Cleveland, and Nick Saban and I worked together along with some other fine people. Then I moved on to run the scouting combine, and then moved to Houston to run their scouting department, and then moved to Tennessee when our club moved there, and from a South Louisiana boy, and I moved back home due to some illnesses in the family, and continue to work in the league. I work for the league and teams in the league as a consultant on scouting and coaching matters. And about a year and a half ago, I was approached about doing a website, and I said, I'm not sure about that. And I said if I was going to do it, I wanted to do something different. So LandryFootball.com is a website we put together for fans to give them a chance to learn what it's like inside a coaching room or a scouting room, and understand really how draft boards are put together, how game plans are put together. So we provide scouting reports, draft boards, evaluate all these players. During the football season, we break down film on the college game, the pro game, recruiting to the draft, you name it. So we've been able to provide that to the fans, and so we think they'll love it if they get a chance to take a look at it, LandryFootball.com. We've got a daily football show that we do, a lot of video tutorials. So it's worked good, and I enjoy being able to, communicate with the fans out there that love this game so much.
Yeah, and it's a year-round deal, the way the interest for fans when it comes to scouting players, when it comes to the draft. But obviously with the first round a week away, you're really amped up right now. And I'm a member of your war room over there at LandryFootball.com. We'll tell some listeners how they can get involved in it, and you got a special deal for them a little bit later on. But in looking at some of your intel, Chris, I'm looking at the grades you've given us to the top overall players, and what stood out to me wasn't that Laramie Tunsil was first, but that you didn't grade anybody as a superstar ability. It kind of starts in the immediate starter range, and that's where you have Tunsil. So obviously a guy could turn into a superstar in this league. It's an inexact science, but why do you feel like there's not a player in this year's draft to you that you look at and say that's guaranteed superstar ability right there?
Well, there's a criteria we put these guys through when we don't just look at them, obviously, and say I like them or don't like them. You've got to describe, we've got about 20 different categories, what we call critical factors and position specifics, which, again, if you're part of the website, you can learn what those are. And we grade guys. We put verbiage as well as numbers on not just a player's overall ability, but the individual skill sets. And we come to numbers, and then we make those evaluations. There's very little guys that get into that 7.4, 7.0 area for a reason. That's what they are now. Not what they can't be developed into the future, but this is what their capabilities are. And I think that there's some really good players in the draft. Immediate starters are outstanding. You get a 6.9, 6.5 grade, that's pretty doggone good. I mean, the 7.0s or the rare guys, the Andrew Luck type guys, and so it is not one of those cases where, like you see in most websites, well, you got to have somebody's going to be a top 5 pick, so let's just put them a grade there. The reason for that is it determines, obviously, the quality of the player, and it helps you to cross-reference through previous drafts and then in future drafts how a guy stacks up to others. So I think those things are really, relevant, and it's a grading system I've been a part of now for 34 years, so I can go back and remember what I gave, a Darryl Green or somebody, that years and years ago, and really use it as a frame of reference of how guys are graded today.
Football scouting consultant Chris Landry, our guest right now here on ESPN1420.com, The Great Scott Show. Chris, so just to rehash, Laramie Tunsil, this guy could become an all-pro, but the intel that you're going to give to a team isn't what he could become, it's what he currently is. Now, he is the top player on your board, followed by Jalen Ramsey. And then we start getting into the quarterbacks, who many expect to go 1 and 2 in the draft. You give Carson Wentz a slight edge over Jared Goff. What do you make of both of these guys, and why does Wentz currently have the slight edge over Goff?
Well, as you look at the grades mean that you could take either one because that's what the grade determines. But the 6'9" and 6'5" are in the same category, both in the immediate starters. The 6'9s are separated by the 6'5s. Obviously, they're on the top of the group. So when you put guys that are multiple 6'5 grades, you got to stack them. And of the two quarterbacks, I think Wentz is a little bit better physically. I think he's got a little bit better ability to see the game from under center. I think he's got all the intangibles, the smarts, as does Goff, but I think that physically Carson is a little bit more advanced and a little bit more capable of having a more consistent career. In theory, Scott, you can't just look at a guy in a bubble and say he's going to be better, because the one thing that people overlook, this is shopping for groceries. You still got to cook the meal. And so how a player is developed, how a player is built around, is going to determine their success level. Scouting is about evaluating the individual player within a team concept. So if all else is equal, I think Wentz has a better chance of having a slight better chance. If I had to choose between the two, that's what I would do. But by definition of the grade, they're both the same. It's not a real difference in terms of the quality of player. Where you get into trouble is if you go down and take a player of need at the next grade tier over a player that's in a better grade tier, because you're not improving your team and you're really not filling a need. And needs are very fluid in today's game. But that's the answer as to why Wentz, in my mind, is stacked ahead of Goff.
Chris Landry, our guest, scouting consultant. And, Chris, you began your career with the Browns. You worked on their coaching staff as well as in both pro personnel and college scouting for them. And they're an organization that, back when you worked for them, they were, I'll just say it, they were better than they've been lately. How much is how overlooked is a player in terms of the situation they go to? Let me word this a little bit better. A lot of times we'll look back at a player and say, well, he was a success, or, he wasn't a bust, but he never quite lived up to the potential. How much do we just overlook, hey, yeah, but he wasn't exactly in a stable situation based on the franchise that drafted him?
Oh, a lot. I mean, as you mentioned, when I was in Cleveland and, the Belichick Cleveland, I was with Ozzie Newsome, the majority of the players, obviously, you got to keep in mind, they went to Baltimore, and you ended up getting the Ed Reeds and the Ray Lewis type guys. So that was kind of the core of the team that we were involved initially in putting together. And the difference is you got to have a philosophy. You've got to stick to the philosophy, be patient, and develop guys within that philosophy. It's like building a house. You have to have a good foundation. You have to know what you want, what you're going to do, a game plan for it, a blueprint for it, and you got to follow through with it. It's okay to change, but keep in mind that if, 8 months into building the house, you tear it down and start over, and you do it again and again, you'll never be able to move into the house. So what's happened with Cleveland since they've come back in the league, since they got the expansion franchise, which is a completely different organization, they've not had any stability. So even if they've had bad plans or plans that were inferior to some degree, had they been a little bit more stable, they would have had more success. But they've never been able to build anything, because when the new person comes in, GM, head coach, they tear it down, start over, tear it down, start over. So that's the reason why they're in there. That's also why teams like the Steelers and the Packers and the Patriots under Bill Belichick, and the ones that are successful. Look why they're successful. Ownership's allowed them to do their job. They're patient. They don't change coaches every 3 or 4 years. That's why it's been that way. I mean, we've seen it. Everybody that's an older South Louisiana fan will understand the old Saints. They change all the time under John Meekum, and they never had any they never were good, but they were never building towards anything, never had a chance. They were good players at times, but they never quite could build anything and never have any stability. Jim Finks comes in, and then obviously the new regime going forward, and they had some down years, but now with Sean and Mickey, they've created a stable environment where even though they're not competing for a championship every year, they've been consistently good, not to the highest level that they want, but that's the real key in the league, and the Browns have really struggled with that for a long time, and right now they're doing it with analytics guys. I don't know how that's going to work, but whatever they're going to do, hopefully they'll give it time and not be snap judgments, but the fan base there is they're at their wits' end, and their roster is worse today than it was at the end of the year, and I'm afraid they're going to be very impatient because they've just had enough with the owner and everything since they've come back into the league.
Chris Landry, our guest, and Chris, I guess that's kind of why when you a consultant for a team, when you give these grades after a lot of in-depth research for these players, it's why you grade what they are now. Tunsil, immediate starter. Jalen Ramsey, immediate starter. You don't give any of them that superstar ability because it's not what you think they can become. It's what they are now, because what they can become is, yes, predicated on that player's mindset and how hard they're going to work, but also predicated on what those teams do with that player once they have him in their hands. And I think the success of Wentz, the success of Goff, the success of a defensive end like a DeForest Buckner, some of it's going to be on the player. And guess what? Some of it's going to be on what the team does with him as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's a combination of scouting is projection. It's about what a guy can be. I mean, I'm a little bit higher on certain players than others because I see what they can be and what they have been in stretches, and it's just a matter of consistency coming out, and that's a part of it. So, I've given 7.0 grades, and I do, but I don't give them away freely, like I said. And I think, immediate starters, he can't get much better than that. And when I say immediate starter, I'm not saying somebody that doesn't have a second-round grade, a potential starter grade. On bad teams, they're going to have to start, because they're not good enough. That's not the point. The grades are given based upon immediate starter for even the best level teams in the league. So that's important to understand. If you put Laramie Tunsil on the Dallas Cowboys with Jaylon Smith, well, he's not going to start because that guy is a proven pro, but Laramie Tunsil is good enough to start if they didn't have him. So it's a league-wide evaluation, and it has to be tailored as I do for different teams. A linebacker for a Bill Belichick New England team is going to be quite different than what they ask in New York or the Saints. So they're going to value certain traits in positions a little bit differently than others. Therefore, what they're looking for in the player, that's what scouting is finding players that fit your scheme that can make your football team better, and having some semblance of an understanding of where you need to draft them to get them and what their value is league-wide. And that's what I spent a lot of time into, because everybody goes in with about 12 to 15 guys that ideally they'd love to have, and they're trying to position themselves to get as many of them as they can for their team. This is a real quick thing your listeners might understand is you got a lot of players that are going to get drafted. Every team will have, and I have it on my board, everybody with a 5.5 grade or better. It's a 150 board, but it's cut off by grades. So it's 170 players. I know the Seahawks this year have 200 players in that grade. But teams will have a 150 board, 150 players. They will conduct their entire draft off that 150 board. They will go through 7 rounds, even if they have as many as 10 or 11 picks, and they will go through their entire draft with 150 maximum, in some cases 125. And you say, well, wait a minute, what's Landry saying? There's over 300 players drafted. The 150 on one board is going to look different than another board, different than another. So those things vary, and everybody's not concerned about mock drafts and what other people say. It's how a guy fits your system and your team.
Chris Landry, our guest, great stuff. And Chris, you work, out of Baton Rouge here in the state of Louisiana. When you look at the Saints as a scout, as an analyst, as a consultant, what do you think their biggest need is heading into this draft?
Oh, it's defense, and to me, I think you build or rebuild a defense from the front back. They need help at corner, but they really need help up front.
Mm-hmm.
I think pass rusher, I think a defensive tackle. I think you really impact the game, obviously, by offensively, got to have a quarterback. They've got one. They certainly need to add a receiver, but defensively, they've got to get off the field on third downs, and they've got to stop the running game. And if they don't, they will never be good enough again to, score enough points to be able to consistently win. They can win games. They can be mediocre. They can be a little better than mediocre or a little worse. But to make another run to the winning a Super Bowl, they've got to defend the run better and rush the passer. So I think there'll be a good defensive end available. Not sure, but I think there'll be a more of a better chance that there'll be a defensive tackle. Sheldon Rankins would be a great fit for him. Their scheme, the defensive tackle from Louisville, very explosive one-gap player that'll fit that scheme. And I think that there's a little better depth at defensive tackle. So if you got 2 6'5" graded players, one's a defensive tackle, one's a defensive end, one of the break points is, all right, we'll look at the board. There's greater depth at tackle. We've got a better chance in the second or third round of getting a defensive tackle and less of a chance at defensive end. So we'll take the end now since the grade says they're the same. So need to look at that and maybe at some point another outside backer, because I think that while they're moving Anthony outside and Laurinaitis is inside, Laurinaitis has not played well. So they've got to get that other young combo guy that, whether Anthony can go back to inside backer at some point or just from a depth standpoint, they need to upgrade that. Certainly corner. They need a guard. They need to add a young tight end and certainly a receiver. So a lot of needs for this team. But to me, they've got to focus a lot on the defensive side. And it doesn't mean all early picks. It just means they've got to get guys that can come in there and impact. And they have not drafted, quite frankly, as well as they did in previous years when they went on a Super Bowl run. Look at the free agent and the draft pickups late in free agency and college free agency that made that team so effective, and they were very aggressive and flipped the ball over for their offense. Look at the moves that they've made in personnel, free agent moves. I mean, C.J. Spiller, Jarius Burr, they've missed on a lot of guys, and they've not been able to. The reason why they went out and spent a lot of money is because they haven't drafted very well. That's got to change if they're going to make a little run here the next few years.
I look at your draft board and your grades. You look at DNs. You mentioned the Saints needing one. I'll get to D tackles in a sec, but DeForest Buckner, Joey Bosa, Shaq Lawson. If any of those guys are there at 12, do you feel like the Saints scoop them up?
Well, there's really no chance Buckner and Bosa will be gone. Buckner's not an ideal scheme fit, but he would be like a Calais Campbell type player. He'll be long gone. Bosa will be long gone. But the answer is yes, they would. I think Shaq Lawson's got a chance to be a Tamba Hali type player, a little bigger. There's a chance he's there, but I think we're probably looking at a Noah Spence if they are not concerned about him off the field. He's the young man that was a 5-star recruit, went to Ohio State, got into trouble with some drug issues, and is at Eastern Kentucky. Kevin Dodd of Clemson. I'm not as high on Emmanuel Ogba as others are, but he's a good straight line guy. I think they'll look at one of those guys at defensive ends if they're there.
D tackle, A'Shawn Robinson's kind of been the guy that I say, look, if he's there, take him, Saints. You mentioned Sheldon Rankins is a better fit. Jaron Reed's another Alabama player that has played on the defensive line. What's your take on Robinson? One, do you think he'll be there? Two, why do you feel like this is a guy that, obviously, I think you've got him ranked, number 10 on your draft board?
Well, I think what A'Shawn is, and a lot of people are not excited because it's in today's game, people love flash. A'Shawn's not flash. He's 6'3" and 5'8", 307 pounds. he can play a 0-3 or a 5 technique. So he's scheme diverse, which they're going to run much more scheme versatility under Dennis Allen. You got to be able to stop the run. And one of the ways that you improve your pass rush is to be able to push the pocket up the middle and allow the edge rushers to have a little bit more flexibility. Depending upon, they're playing Anthony on the outside this year, Haloi Kakaha, so they've got some ability to pressure the edge from a 2-point stance with those guys. And then in Kakaha's case, they can put him down in a 3-point and nickel. So I think it gives you a lot of versatility, and it clogs the middle, which is so important. So you can play him on the nose. Again, you can play him wide on early downs. And he's not a pass rusher. He's a bull guy that collapses the pocket that allows the edge rushers to have success. Sheldon Rankins is a little different player. So they're completely different. Rankins is 6'1 and an eighth, 299, but he's a one-gap penetrator. He's a guy that will take an edge, get upfield, be quick, get into the backfield more. Alabama's defense is on building a wall. They don't teach their guys to rush the passer up front. The edge guys do that, and they'll blitz some, but they build a wall so that then they push that wall towards you, and that's how they do it. So I think guys like Robinson and Reed are good. They're good in a box. I don't think there'll ever be a guy that's going to be able to rush the passer, but they'll make you pass rushers better. I think all three of those guys would be really good value. A guy like a Robert Kondichi, I would personally avoid that high simply because when he flashes, he's a great player, but he's definitely a high-risk, high-reward player, not only off the field, but on the field. He doesn't play with the type of consistency. But to me, I think between certainly Robinson and Rankins and even Reed, I think all three of those guys, along with at least a couple I think three of those defensive ends we just talked about, are going to be there for the Saints. So I think a lot of those guys are in play.
Chris Landry, our guest, ESPN 1420, ESPN1420.com. Jaylon Smith, linebacker, outside linebacker out of Notre Dame. Not expected to play this year, Chris, as you know, because of the injury he suffered in the postseason. But a guy that, if healthy, is a special player. So, you've been there before. You've worked in the front office with teams. I mean, you were serving as the coordinator for the NFL Scouting Combine back in 1993. How do you view a guy like that? Where does he go? How high? I mean, risk versus reward, sure, but
right.
How do you approach somebody like him? Ultra talented, but ultimately you're not exactly sure how he's going to come back from this injury.
Well, you got to rely on your medical staff, and one of the things I always told our doctors is, look, you're the doctor. Here's what I need to know from you. On an injury, they can't say when they're going to be ready for certain. On some injuries, you can. This one's different. Why? There's nerve degenerative conditions. So nerves can't regenerate like a normal rehab. They just are going to happen. The good Lord's going to take care of that. And based upon past medical history, they can give you a range, but they don't know for certain. Listen, it's not unlike Peyton Manning. He developed atrophy because doctors didn't know. They weren't sure he could even, play again. Okay, we all know his story. So you got to rely on your medical staff. What you ask him is, all right, now, at a point when he's going to be healthy, give me your best guess as to are there going to be any degenerative conditions that will make his lifespan in the league lessened, and by how much? And I always tell guys, have the onions to just stand on the table and say, yeah, I believe in this guy. I believe he's going to do it. Now, we combine that, and this is not the case here, but what's the guy's work ethic in the weight room? Toughest thing, Scott, is when guys get injured. It's harder to work to get over an injury than it is to develop as a football player because you're by yourself. You're with a trainer, you're with a doctor, and you're getting better, and you're not part of a team anymore. It's the toughest thing. And so, you combine those two and determine where is the risk mitigated enough to take it. So I thought and was hopeful that when we went to the rechecks last week that it might be a little bit more positive where you could see him go first or second. I can't tell you where he's going to go. I would say most people wouldn't want to take a chance until about the fourth round. But there might be one team that says, you know what, we got an extra pick in the second, we might do it. Sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't. It's watch for the teams that have the multiple picks, the extra compensatory pick in the third and fourth round. Take a chance on it. The Niners did it with Marcus Lattimore. It didn't work. The young man didn't come back. Had it would have been, great for them. Unfortunately for him, and he's going on to a coaching career, it hasn't. He is one of the top 2 or 3 players in this draft, but you have to wonder, and you have to, what do we call the medical competitive advantage, determine, the risk of it. We give medical grades, the doctors do and the trainers do, just like we do, other grades. And here's how we do it. And you hear people, we take them off the board. Never take a guy off the board. You put him on a board where his football ability is, and you put a shield or a button, red for medical, blue for character, yellow is for drug dependency, and you put the shield on him, meaning that you pass over him for that reason. So that way you never lose sight of him. Somebody's going to probably take him anyway, but if you're there in the 4th round or in the 5th round, and you feel like, hey, players A, B, and C are not likely to make our team, at that point you might say, you know what, it's a risk for those guys for different reasons, then we might take a guy like this. That's how you do it and how you weigh it. But it's doctors see things differently. You would be shocked. One doctor may say, I wouldn't touch this guy. Some doctors don't want to jump on the table for someone. They're very, very conservative. Others will say, yeah, this guy will, I believe this guy in a couple of, he'll be fine in a year and a half, and there'll be no issues with him. That's going to determine ultimately whether you pull the trigger on the guy or not.
LandryFootball.com is where you can go to learn more about our guest right now, Chris Landry. Football views from a coach, a scout, an administrator. I'm a member of the war room over there. That's what, if you really want to learn what's happening at college football and the NFL from inside that film room, where decisions are made, that's what you want to be. Chris, for our listeners listening right now, if they really want to just get more of this, dig in, you're offering, 50% off, a discount code right now for some of our listeners?
Absolutely. All they need to do, first of all, there's a lot of free information on there. So feel free to go there, take a look at what we got, read what the War Room is all about, and we've got a lot of stuff. We've also got a lot of stuff on the history of the NFL draft and players that are taken and great stories. You can access that for free. And obviously the evaluations and everything, it's $99 a year. It's $9.99 a month, but we're offering a 50% discount for the first year. So if you want to try it for an entire year, it's $49.99. If you want to try it for a month, it's $4.99 for the first month. So all you need to do is go, and when you check out, type in the key code DRAFT, D-R-A-F-T, and you get 50% off. So people who come, they usually stay. So, and the great thing about it, once the draft, we'll recap everything in the draft. We'll break down all the college rosters. We'll break down, all the NFL rosters, and we do that all in the off season and get ready for the season. So it's a 12-month a year. So your subscription will get you everything through this draft, recapping the draft, get you ready for next season, all the film breakdowns during the season, all through next off-season recruiting and the draft and free agency, all the way to this time next year. So I look at it like, as a fan, you're the owner of the team. I'm your general manager. I answer your questions, just like when the owner came in and said, tell me about this guy. Why do we have this guy rated here? What's the reason? Why should we make this move? That's what you are as a fan. You're the owner, and I'm your general manager. So that's the way we approach it, and we've gotten great response from it.
I could talk to you for a lot longer than a half an hour, and I know the listeners would love the insight, but that's why they can go to LandryFootball.com, get some more intel from a guy that lives it, a guy that's done it, a guy that continues to do it. Chris, last thing before I let you go. As you know, we're here in Lafayette at ESPN 1420 and .com. So when you look at Louisiana's Raging Cajuns, a couple of the guys coming out, a player like a Jamal Robinson, which of these guys do you think has the best chance to get drafted? And just some quick analysis on a couple of Raging Cajuns.
Well, I think Jamal's got a chance. I think the guys that are there, it's not the banner year for the Cajuns in terms of draft prospects. I think that we'll see two or three of those guys in a camp. I've talked to a few people about them. I think they've worked out well. And listen, is it a possibility late round? Yeah, but I think that more realistic is that we'll see a handful of those guys hopefully in a camp, and then it's about making your opportunity. Here's what I always tell them and tell guys is, and this is a little bit surprising too to people, is when the draft is over, you have a number of guys on your draft board that are not drafted. Just the pure numbers dictate that. So I always tell guys, don't worry about not getting drafted. I know it's frustrating, but now you got a chance to pick what team you want to go to and the best chance to make it. And it's really better, instead of being a late-round pick at times, if you can get over the frustration, to be undrafted and have a chance to go where you want to go and maybe get a few teams competing for you, and you get a little pocket change on a signing bonus, and then you go forward and make the most of it. But I think the best players on the team, I think, are in terms of prospects, are younger guys. This is just a year that just kind of worked out where it's not a banner year for them.
Chris Landry has been our guest. If you want some more intel, more insight into a lot of the local prospects around the state, the Saints, teams, draft prospects, LandryFootball.com. Plenty of free stuff there. And if you want to join the War Room, as he said, he's offering our listeners a special deal, 50% off if you use the discount code DRAFT. Now, that's not going to be there forever, so go check out for yourself, make your own decisions. Chris, I talked to you last year before the draft. Did it again this year. Hope to do it again next year. Love the insight. Love the intel. Keep it up. Thanks for the knowledge, my friend, and let's do it again in the future.
Well, let's do it. We got football season coming up, so don't be a stranger, and love everybody in Lafayette, so be safe out there, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you again real soon.